Hello friends and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is a special one. After 330 days, my aquarium has transformed into a living jungle, packed with plants, fish, shrimp and unexpected drama. We'll revisit the highs and lows of this 1 year long journey. From explosive plant growth to heat waves that tested the balance to the new predators and grazers that shaped the ecosystem. Let's dive right in. We start with the foundation of the jungle tank. At the very bottom, I add a base layer of pond soil, topped with bacteria-rich substrate from my old aquarium, and finally capped with a simple play stand from the hardware store. The entire substrate setup cost me only about 20 euros, since I skipped the expensive aquarium branded soils. For structure, I place in rocks and roots and finish with the first plants, some hardy cryptocorytes. Just one day later, all of the first species are settling in. Hygrophila sways gently in the current, while Nerite snails and bladder snails begin grazing on the glass. Antler's guppies dart through the duckweed at the surface, and peppered corridoras sift through the sand below. And even the black molly is exploring every corner. The water is still a little cloudy from the fresh sand, but there's no need for chemicals. Time and biology will clear it up naturally. After just 5 days, the tank is ready for more life. I add both tiger and giant Vallisneria, another patch of Anubias battery, and a new cleanup crew, zebra Nerite snails and red-rimmed Melania snails. That brings the total to 14 species in the tank already. 2 weeks in and algae has started to take over. But at the same time, you can clearly see how much the plants have grown in only in 9 days. All without CO2 ejection or artificial fertilizers. To keep things balanced, I scrape algae from the front glass with a razor blade, siphon out the debris, and finish with a partial water change. After 34 days, the tank looks lush and healthy. The endless life bearer males are busy chasing the larger females, while the black molly has quietly established itself as the strongest fish in the tank. For now, at least. But none of them can do much against the stubborn growth of filamentous algae. Over the coming days and weeks, I'll be manually cleaning the glass and pulling out strands, while larger plants like Hygrophila slowly start to take over and outcompete the algae. Still, I feel it's time to give the cleanup crew a little boost. That's where the shrimp come in. Neocaridina davidi, often called cherry shrimp, are hardy algae grazers that will constantly pick at biofilm and detritus. And Amano shrimp, named after aquascaper Takashi Amano, are famous for their ability to tackle tougher algae types that most other shrimp ignore. Together, they'll keep the tank cleaner while adding more activity and color to the ecosystem. On day 91, we've reached peak Hygrophila corymbosa stricta growth. The tank looks absolutely lush and green, like a small excerpt from the Amazon River itself. When I take the GoPro underwater, the sheer mass of plants becomes really obvious. At the surface, the black molly and the guppies patrol the open water, while the peppered corridoras control the sandy bottom. But one ecological niche remains untouched, the midsection of the tank. To fill that gap, I'm introducing 8 Ember Tetras on day 115. After carefully acclimating them to the new water parameters, I slowly release them to their new environment. Ember Tetras are tiny and they are rarely growing larger than 2 cm or 0.8 inches. But they make up for their size with brilliant orange coloration that glows against the green plants. In the wild, they come from slow-moving, plant-rich streams in Brazil, and their natural schooling behavior makes them feel safest when kept in groups. Constant movement adds both security for the fish and a lively splash of color in the heart of the aquarium. On day 165, I finally decided to introduce a true predator into this otherwise peaceful ecosystem. The main motivation was to help control the guppy population, and especially to give guppy fry with birth defects or inbreeding weaknesses a natural check through predation. When I open the lid of the transport container, I see 2 Mexican dwarf crayfish. One is a small, agile specimen I name Mr. Krabs. The other one, slightly larger, immediately catches my attention. He struggles to stay upright, barely moving. Closer inspection reveals the truth. He only has 2 legs left. Maybe they were lost during the transport, or perhaps nipped off in the crowded pet store tank. I call him Larry Lobster, and I can only hope he will survive. With a chopstick, I gently flip Larry to check if he's still alive. Side by side, the difference is obvious. Larry struggles while Mr. Krabs looks healthy and alert. Determined to give them the best chance, I begin a careful acclimation process. I place a patch of floating plants with long roots into their transport container, giving them cover and something to grip. Then, glass by glass, I add small portions of tank water over the course of an hour. Finally, I use the floating plants as a kind of life raft to transport Larry into the aquarium. He first rests on a patch of Limnophilia sessiflora plants, but almost immediately some larger guppy females investigate, even nipping at him as if he were food. Despite his injuries, Larry defends himself. His claws remain majestic and strong. Still, it's uncertain whether he will survive even this very first day. For Mr. Krabs, I also use a floating plants raft. I want to avoid nets that could damage his delicate limbs. Once in the tank, he immediately takes the center stage. He confidently explores the sand and the small cryptocoryons and lobelia plants in the foreground before disappearing behind a thick curtain of giant Vallisneria australis plants. At first, everything seems peaceful, until suddenly there's a commotion in the plants. Mr. Krabs has spotted one of my favorite guppies, Guppy Goopert. He's a healthy young male with bright colors and large fancy fins, but those fins make him slower and more vulnerable. In an instant, Mr. Krabs lunges, his claws snapping shut around Guppy Goopert's flowing tail. For a few 10 seconds, it looks like the end. Guppy Goopert thrashes wildly, trying to twist free, while the other guppies scatter in panic. Mr. Krabs doesn't let go. His claws are powerful and built to crush. I hesitate, wondering if I should let nature play out. But finally grab my chopstick and carefully separate the two. Slowly, Guppy Goopert slips free, darting into the safety of the Vallisneria wall. Mr. Krabs retreats back into the shadows, still waving his claws defiantly. At that moment, I wasn't sure if Guppy Goopert would survive. But 8 days later, I spotted him again. His fins were visibly smaller, but intact, and he was doing more than fine. And then came another surprise. Just 3 more days later, Larry, the injured crayfish, had already regrown all of his missing legs. Crayfish have an extraordinary ability to regenerate lost limbs after molting. With each new shell they build, they invest energy into replacing what was lost, until the limbs are fully functional again. On day 221, about 6 months after adding them, my Amano shrimp, Cardinia multidentata, have nearly doubled in size. They graze tirelessly on algae and biofilm throughout the entire tank. For the first 3 months, I barely ever saw them, since they hid among the Vallisneria and crypts, but now they've become much more confident. Sometimes I even spot 2 Amano shrimp at the same time wandering across the open foreground. Despite their efforts, biofilm and algae have once again gotten out of hand, and alongside it, my bladder snails, Physella acuta, and Malaysian trumpet snail populations have exploded. To show you what I mean, here's a time-lapse of gravel I pulled out from the tank, just a surface layer. At first, it looks like a pile of sand and stones, until it starts moving. Hundreds of tiny snails wriggle and crawl in every direction, and this is just a small subset of the whole snail population. But the real problem isn't just the snail numbers. A stubborn black algae has begun to take over, coating the leaves of my hygrophila and cryptocorym plants, and even covering the shells of the snails themselves that were supposed to eat the algae. Here you can see one bladder snail completely blanketed in black strands, dragging the algae along with it like a shaggy coat. Clearly, neither the snails nor the Amano shrimp can keep this problem contained. That's why I decided to bring in 2 new helpers. Assassin snails, Clea Helena, to control the snail population, and Otocinlcus Catfish to battle the algae. Before introducing them, I carefully acclimated both species to the new water parameters, adjusting for pH, hardness, and temperature. During this process, I noticed the Otocinlcus looked almost see-through in their transport container. That's usually a sign of stress. Fish often mute their pigmentation under stress or unfamiliar conditions as their bodies focused on survival rather than display. Once acclimation was done, it was time to release them. The assassin snail wasted no time. Clearly hungry from the transport, it went straight for a Malaysian trumpet snail. Assassin snails are carnivores that use long, harpoon-like proboscis to pierce their prey and inject digestive enzymes. The snail is then slowly consumed from the inside out. It may sound brutal, but in a closed ecosystem like this, they play an important balancing role. Meanwhile, the Otocinlcus Catfish wasted no time either. I released all 5 at once, and immediately they darted onto the glass and leaves, scraping away algae and biofilm with their little sucker mouths. At first, they still appeared pale and almost transparent, their bodies showing hints of the organs inside. But that's just a temporary response to stress. After a few hours in their new home, they regained their full coloration, showing the subtle patterns of a healthy Otocinlcus. Together, these two species will hopefully restore balance once again. The assassin snails reducing the exploding snail population, and the Otocinlcus creating cleaner leaves for the plants to photosynthesize more efficiently. It's a constant cycle in this 240-liter jungle tank, but every new addition brings me one step closer to a truly stable system. At least that was the plan. But between mid-July and August 2025, southern Germany was hit by a severe heatwave. My tank water temperature climbed far above the usual stable range, and that can be deadly for many aquarium species. Warm water holds less dissolved oxygen, so even with good surface movement, fish and invertebrates may struggle to breathe. Corridorus catfish, which spend most of their time on the bottom, are especially vulnerable to low oxygen conditions. Black mollies can tolerate a wide range of parameters, but extreme and sustained heat puts enormous stress on their metabolism, shortening the lifespan. This is especially the case if you have old black mollies, like I do here, with a 5-year-old black molly. And for Mexican dwarf crayfish, the stress of constant high temperatures often weakens their immune system, leaving them prone to disease or organ failure. Normally, I leave dead fish in the tank for my other fish to consume, but in this extreme environment I remove them to prevent the water from deteriorating. Unfortunately, this combination of factors was very likely the reason I lost most of my larger animals during that summer heatwave. That meant I still needed a larger predator to help control the guppy fry, especially those suffering from inbreeding issues, like this female I spotted at my friend Adrian's tank with a visibly twisted spine. My Atlas life bearers are thriving and busy reproducing, enjoying a varied diet, like raw tomato, for example. But the population needed some natural regulation. I decided to introduce 3 eel-like predators, black Kuhli loaches. These fascinating fish are nocturnal scavengers, extremely social, and use their barbels to detect food buried in the substrate. They can reach up to 10 centimeters in length, are surprisingly agile, and their slender bodies allow them to navigate tight spaces between plants and rocks. To make things a bit more fun, I conducted a poll on the community section of my channel and decided to name the smallest black Kuhli loach Dyson. One of the larger ones is named Papa Loach. If you have name suggestions for the third one, please drop them in the comment section below. And now, the tank turns suspenseful as a tiny guppy fry swims very close to the mouth of the black Kuhli loach. Then, in a flash, it disappears into its mouth, in one smooth motion. Nature at work, in all its dramatic glory. To further control the overpopulation of snails, I added 5 red racer Nerite snails. These algae specialists cannot reproduce in fresh water, making them perfect for targeted cleaning. They are resilient, excellent climbers, and can tackle even stubborn biofilm on leaves and rocks. If you enjoyed this tank evolution, check out my last video where I built a paludarium jar featuring rubber ducky isopods, planaria worms, bladder snails, copepods, and mayfly nymphs with stunning moss and plants collected from the Danube River. Or watch the video on the left. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more aquatic adventures.